The moment Ophelia Lancaster stepped off the dusty stagecoach in Lordsburg, New Mexico territory, she knew the man waiting at the station had seen her before she could adjust the high collar meant to hide the worst of the damage. It was late April in 1883, and the afternoon sun blazed mercilessly across the parched landscape, making her scars ache beneath the carefully arranged fabric that covered the right side of her neck and disappeared beneath her travel-worn dress. Zachary Morrison stood near the hitching post, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the sun-bleached wood of the station platform. He was broader through the shoulders than she had expected from his letters, his face weathered by years of working beneath the unforgiving New Mexico sun. His dark hair needed trimming, and his clothes, though clean, showed the wear of a working rancher. When their eyes met, Ophelia instinctively turned her head to show him only her left side, the unmarked side, the side that still looked like the young woman she had been before the fire that destroyed her family's home in Philadelphia 3 years ago. She watched his expression carefully, waiting for the inevitable moment of revulsion, the tightening around the eyes, the polite but distant tone that would enter his voice. She had experienced it enough times to recognize the signs immediately. Instead, Zachary walked forward with steady, unhurried steps, removing his hat as he approached. "Miss Lancaster." His voice was deep, with a slight roughness that suggested years of calling orders across open range. "I am Zachary Morrison. Welcome to Lordsburg." Ophelia offered her gloved hand, her spine rigid with tension. "Mr. Morrison, thank you for meeting me." He took her hand gently, and she noticed the calluses that spoke of hard work, honest labor. His grip was warm even through her thin gloves. "The journey from Philadelphia must have been exhausting. My wagon is just over there. I will get your trunk." As he moved to collect her belongings from the stagecoach driver, Ophelia allowed herself a moment to study him more closely. His letters over the past 6 months had been straightforward and honest, describing his ranch 10 miles outside of town, his need for a wife to help manage the household, his desire for companionship, and eventually a family. He had never claimed to be wealthy, but he had made it clear he could provide a decent living. What had drawn her to respond to his advertisement had been a single line in his first letter. "I am looking for a woman of character and strength, someone who understands that life on the frontier requires courage." She had needed courage to survive the fire that killed her parents and younger brother. She had needed courage to endure the painful treatments that followed, the months of recovery, the pitying looks and whispered comments. She had needed courage to realize that no man in Philadelphia would want her now, that her once promising prospects had turned to ash along with half her family. When her aunt, with whom she had been living, began suggesting she might find work as a seamstress hidden away in some back room, Ophelia knew she had to seek a different future. Zachary returned with her trunk balanced easily on his shoulder. "The wagon is not fancy, but the seat is padded. It is about an hour's ride to the ranch." They walked together to a sturdy wagon hitched to 2 patient horses. Zachary secured her trunk in the back and then offered his hand to help her up onto the seat. As she settled her skirts, she became aware that he was studying her face, not attempting to hide his gaze. Her breath caught in her throat, and she fought the urge to pull her collar higher, though it already reached nearly to her jawline. "Miss Lancaster," he said quietly, not yet climbing up beside her, "I can see you are nervous. I want you to know that I appreciate the courage it must have taken to travel all this way to marry a man you have never met." "You do not know anything about courage required of me," she said, her voice sharper than she intended. The long journey had worn down her usual careful politeness. "No," he agreed, surprising her. "But I would like to learn if you are willing to tell me." He climbed up beside her and took the reins, clicking his tongue to get the horses moving. As they pulled away from the station, he added, "I see strength, Miss Lancaster. That is what I notice when I look at you." She turned to face him fully for the first time, letting him see the right side of her face and neck where the burn scars twisted the skin in rippling patterns, pulling at the corner of her mouth slightly, leaving discolored patches that no amount of powder could fully hide. "You cannot possibly miss these." Zachary kept his eyes on the road ahead as they left the small town behind, heading into the open country dotted with mesquite and creosote bush. "I see them. I am not blind, but what I notice first is the way you carry yourself, the determination in your eyes. Those scars tell me you survived something terrible. That speaks of strength, not weakness." Ophelia felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen just slightly. "A fire, 3 years ago. It took my family. I barely escaped. I am sorry for your loss." His words were simple, but carried genuine sympathy. "My own family is gone too. Different circumstances, but the pain of being alone in the world is something I understand." They rode in silence for a while, the wagon wheels creaking rhythmically, the horses' hooves clopping steadily against the hard, packed earth. The landscape stretched endlessly in all directions, so different from the crowded streets of Philadelphia. The sky seemed impossibly large, an endless blue dome broken only by a few wispy clouds. "Tell me about your ranch," Ophelia said, wanting to break the silence that had grown between them. Zachary's expression lightened. "It is called the Broken Bell Ranch. The previous owner had a broken bell he hung by the main gate as a joke, said it represented his broken dreams. I kept the name but not the attitude. I have 300 acres of grazing land, about 100 head of cattle, some horses. I have 2 men who work for me full-time, brothers named Samuel and Joseph Torres. Good men, hard workers. They have a small cabin on the north section of the property. The main house is simple but solid. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, a parlor, a good well for water. And you need a wife because—" She let the question hang in the air. "Because cooking for myself has gotten tiresome, and I am tired of my own company," he said with a slight smile. Then his expression grew more serious. "Truth is, Miss Lancaster, I am 32 years old. I have spent the last 8 years building this ranch from almost nothing. I have land and livestock and a future. What I do not have is someone to share it with. I want a family. I want children running around the yard. I want to come in from a long day of work and have someone to talk to, someone who cares whether I make it back safely." "That is honest," Ophelia admitted. "I figure we have enough to deal with starting a marriage this way without adding lies to the mix," Zachary said. "So I will be straight with you. I cannot promise you an easy life. Ranch work is hard, and sometimes the weather does not cooperate, or the cattle get sick, or 100 other things go wrong. But I can promise you that I will work hard to provide for you and any children we might have. I can promise you respect and honesty, and I can promise you that I will never judge you for scars that tell the story of your survival." Ophelia felt tears prickling at her eyes, but she blinked them back. "You make promises easily. I only make promises I intend to keep." He glanced at her then. "What about you, Miss Lancaster? What are you hoping for from this arrangement?" She considered her answer carefully. "Safety. A place where I belong. The possibility of a family, though I have worried that might not be possible given how people react to me. In Philadelphia, men who had once shown interest disappeared when they saw what the fire had done. I began to think I would spend my life alone. Then those men were fools who could not see past the surface to the person underneath," Zachary said firmly. "I have seen too much of life and death to worry about scars on skin. It is the scars people carry on the inside that cause the real problems. As they continued across the landscape, Zachary pointed out landmarks, telling her about the territory, the neighbors scattered across the vast distances, the challenges of ranching in such an arid climate. He talked about the seasonal patterns, how the summer monsoons would bring relief from the heat, but also could cause flash floods, how winter could be surprisingly cold despite the desert setting. There is a small community of ranchers and farmers in this area, he explained. We help each other when needed. Nearest neighbors are the Haskell family about 4 miles west. They have 3 daughters. I think you would like Martha Haskell. She is a practical woman, knows how to survive out here. Will they accept me? Ophelia asked quietly. Once they see. Zachary was quiet for a moment, and she appreciated that he did not rush to empty reassurances. Some folks might be surprised at first, but the people who have made it out here are survivors themselves. They know life is hard and what matters is someone's character. Give them a chance to know you, and I think you will find acceptance. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon when Zachary turned the wagon onto a narrower track. We are on my land now, he said, and she could hear the pride in his voice. Another 20 minutes to the house. True to his word, the house came into view as they crested a small rise. It was a single-story structure built of adobe and wood, with a covered porch across the front and a few trees providing some shade. Several outbuildings stood nearby, including a barn, a stable, and what looked like a chicken coop. A windmill turned lazily in the breeze, and she could see a vegetable garden, though it looked somewhat neglected. I tried keeping up the garden, Zachary said, following her gaze, but I am better with cattle than cucumbers. Despite her nerves, Ophelia smiled. I know something about gardens. My mother taught me before she passed. He pulled the wagon to a stop near the house and set the brake. Come inside. I will show you around and you can rest before dinner. We can talk about the wedding arrangements once you have had time to settle in. Where will I sleep tonight? She asked, suddenly aware of the implications of being alone with a man who was not yet her husband. The smaller bedroom is ready for you, he said. I put fresh linens on the bed this morning. We will be properly married before we share a room, Miss Lancaster. I may be rough around the edges, but I do have some sense of propriety. Relieved, Ophelia let him help her down from the wagon. Her legs were stiff from the long journey and she stumbled slightly. Zachary's hand steadied her, strong and sure. Careful, take your time. The inside of the house was simple but clean, better than she had dared to hope. The main room served as both kitchen and parlor, with a large fireplace, a sturdy table with 4 chairs, a few comfortable-looking chairs near the hearth, and shelves lined with books. She was surprised by the books until she remembered a line from one of his letters about his mother being a schoolteacher before moving west. Your room is through here, Zachary said, leading her to a door off the main room. The bedroom was small but adequate, with a real bed frame and mattress, a dresser with a mirror, and a window that looked out toward the mountains in the distance. A wash basin and pitcher sat on a small table. I will bring in your trunk, he said. Take whatever time you need to freshen up. I need to check on the animals, but I will be back to fix dinner in about an hour. I can prepare dinner, Ophelia offered, if you tell me what you have available. Zachary looked surprised, then pleased. You must be exhausted from traveling. I am, she admitted. But I think keeping busy will help more than lying down right now. I am too wound up to rest. He showed her the pantry, the root cellar, the smokehouse where he kept preserved meats. The supplies were basic but adequate. I make a supply run into Lordsburg every few weeks, he explained. Pick up flour, sugar, coffee, whatever else is needed. I can work with this, Ophelia said, already planning a simple meal. "You see to your animals, Mr. Morrison. I will have something ready when you return." He paused at the door. "You can call me Zachary if you are comfortable with that. Seems silly to stand on formality when we are planning to marry." "Then you should call me Ophelia." He nodded, settling his hat back on his head. "Ophelia, that is a beautiful name." Then he was gone, the screen door closing softly behind him. Alone in his house, soon to be her house, Ophelia took a moment to absorb the reality of her situation. She was more than 1,500 miles from everything she had known, about to marry a stranger, beginning a completely new life. The smart part of her brain whispered that this was reckless, dangerous even. But another part, the part that had been suffocating under the weight of pity and rejection in Philadelphia, felt something that might have been hope. She removed her travel jacket and rolled up her sleeves, unconcerned here in the privacy of the house about revealing more of the scarring that extended down her right arm. The burns had been worst on her neck and shoulder, but they spread in patches down to her elbow. She had learned to work around the limited mobility the scars caused, the way the tightened skin sometimes pulled uncomfortably. Working in someone else's kitchen should have felt strange, but there was something comforting about the familiar tasks of preparing food. She found beans that needed soaking, but there was rice she could cook. In the smokehouse, she found bacon and some dried beef. She could make a decent stew. The vegetable situation was dire, but she found some onions and carrots that were still good. As she worked, she thought about Zachary's words in the wagon. "I see strength, not scars." Was it possible he truly meant that? Or would familiarity breed contempt, as her aunt had suggested? Men can be noble when courting, her aunt had warned. But day after day, seeing those marks, it will wear on him. Best to know that going in. She pushed the bitter thoughts away and focused on cooking. By the time Zachary returned, washing up at the pump outside before coming in, she had managed a respectable meal. "That smells wonderful," he said, genuine appreciation in his voice. "Better than anything I have managed in months." They sat down to eat together, an awkward first dinner that felt momentous somehow. Zachary asked her about her journey west, and she told him about the seemingly endless train rides, the uncomfortable nights trying to sleep sitting up, the strange foods at stations along the way, the overwhelming vastness of the country as they traveled farther from the crowded eastern cities. "Did you have doubts?" he asked. "On the journey, did you think about turning back?" Ophelia considered lying, offering some romantic notion that she had never wavered, but he had asked for honesty. "Every single day," she admitted. "I kept thinking about how insane this was, traveling to marry a complete stranger. But then I would remember what was waiting for me back in Philadelphia. A life of hiding, of being an object of pity, of diminishing prospects. At least this is a chance for something different. Even if different might mean harder. Hard work does not frighten me," she said. "Pity does, rejection does. Being treated as broken, that terrifies me. But hard work, I can handle hard work." Zachary leaned back in his chair, studying her across the table. "How did you survive the fire?" "You do not have to tell me if you do not want to, but I admit I am curious." Ophelia set down her fork, her appetite fading as memories rushed back. "It started in the middle of the night. Something with the furnace," they said later. "By the time we realized what was happening, the stairs were already engulfed. My father tried to get us out through the upper windows, but the smoke was so thick. My little brother Samuel, he was only 8. The smoke got to him so fast." Her voice cracked, and she paused to compose herself. Zachary waited silently, not pushing, just listening. "My mother would not leave Samuel, even though he was already gone. She kept trying to wake him. My father was trying to break through the window, the old one that had been painted shut too many times. I was closer to the other bedroom window, and he yelled at me to get out. I did not want to leave them, but he insisted. She touched her neck unconsciously. A burning beam fell as I was climbing through, caught my dress, my hair. I fell 2 stories to the garden below. Broke my arm in the fall, but I was alive. I could see them in the window, see the flames, and then I could not see anything anymore. "I am so sorry," Zachary said quietly. "That is a weight you should never have had to carry." The pain of the burns was almost easier than the pain of surviving when they did not, Ophelia whispered. People treated me like I was either incredibly lucky or somehow cursed. Some acted like the scars were punishment for something, as if God had marked me. "That is nonsense," Zachary said with sudden fierceness. "Cruel nonsense. You survived because you were strong enough to climb out that window when your body must have been screaming in pain. That is not a curse. That is strength." Ophelia looked at him, this man she barely knew, and saw no pity in his eyes, only a kind of fierce respect that she had not expected. "How did you lose your family?" she asked. His jaw tightened, but he answered. "Cholera outbreak. 12 years ago when I was 20. Swept through the little town in Kansas where we were living. Took my mother, my father, and my younger sister in less than a week. I survived, probably because I was strong and healthy and lucky. Afterward, there was nothing keeping me there. I worked my way south and west, doing whatever jobs I could find, saving money. Eventually ended up here and found this land for sale at a price I could almost afford. No other family, distant cousins back east somewhere, but we were never close. I wrote to let them know after my parents died, but never heard back. You, my aunt, my mother's sister, but she made it clear I was a burden. No cousins, no siblings, just me." They were quiet for a moment, 2 people who had lost everything, sitting together in a house on the edge of the frontier. "We are quite a pair," Zachary finally said with a rueful smile. "Yes," Ophelia agreed. "I suppose we are." After dinner, as Ophelia cleaned up, Zachary sat at the table with a cup of coffee. "We should talk about the wedding," he said. "There is a minister who rides circuit through this area. He is due in Lordsburg this Sunday. That is 5 days from now. Would that be too soon?" "What would be the purpose of waiting?" Ophelia asked practically. "We entered into this arrangement with the understanding we would marry, unless you have changed your mind." "No," he said quickly. "I have not changed my mind at all. I just wanted to give you the option if you needed more time." 5 days is fine," she said. "What do I need to do?" "Just be there," Zachary said. "I will arrange everything with the minister. Maybe we could ask the Torah's brothers and the Haskell family to stand as witnesses. Then afterward we could have a small meal at the hotel dining room in Lordsburg. Nothing fancy, but it seems like we should mark the occasion somehow." "That sounds appropriate," Ophelia agreed, though her stomach fluttered with nerves at the thought of meeting his employees and neighbors. Meeting people always meant the moment when they saw her scars, the inevitable stares and awkward reactions. As if reading her thoughts, Zachary said, "Samuel and Joseph are good men. Their mother was Mexican, their father a white settler. They have dealt with their share of prejudice and know what it is like to be judged on appearance. They will not be unkind. And the Haskells, salt of the earth. Martha Haskell once delivered a calf in the middle of a rainstorm and then went home and cooked Sunday dinner for 15 people. Her husband Frank is quiet but decent. The daughters are young, but they are being raised right." Ophelia nodded, wanting to believe him but unable to completely suppress her anxiety. "I suppose I will find out soon enough." The rest of the evening passed quietly. Zachary showed her where everything was in the house, explained the routines of the ranch, the typical schedule. When the sun finally set and darkness filled the windows, Ophelia excused herself to her room, exhausted beyond measure. She changed into her nightgown and stood for a moment looking at herself in the mirror. Even in the dim lamplight, the scars were visible, twisting across her skin, a permanent reminder of the worst night of her life. She thought again of Zachary's words, "I see strength, not scars." Could it possibly be true? Could this strange arrangement actually work? She blew out the lamp and climbed into bed, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the desert night. Somewhere in the house, she could hear Zachary moving around, banking the fire, checking the doors. Soon, those sounds faded, and there was only the whisper of wind and the distant call of a coyote. Ophelia closed her eyes and tried to imagine a future here, in this harsh, beautiful land, married to a man who claimed not to be bothered by her scars. It seemed impossible, a dream too fragile to trust, but she had taken the first step by coming here. Now she would take the next and then the next and see where this unexpected path might lead. The next morning, Ophelia woke to the sound of roosters crowing and sunlight streaming through her window. For a disoriented moment, she forgot where she was, then memory rushed back. New Mexico, the ranch, Zachary. She dressed quickly, covering her scars as thoroughly as possible out of habit, and emerged from her room to find the main room empty. Through the window, she could see Zachary near the barn, talking to two men who must be the Torah's brothers. Not wanting to interrupt, she started breakfast with the supplies she had identified the night before. She was just putting biscuits in the oven when the door opened, and Zachary came in, followed by the two other men. "Ophelia," Zachary said, "I would like you to meet Samuel and Joseph Torres. They have worked for me for 5 years and keep this ranch running smoothly." Samuel, the older of the two, was perhaps 30, with weathered features and kind eyes. Joseph looked to be in his mid-20s, broader in build and with a quicker smile. Both removed their hats politely as they entered. "Madam," Samuel said with a slight nod, "welcome to the Broken Bell." "It is nice to meet you both," Ophelia said, then added honestly, "Zachary says this place would fall apart without you." Joseph laughed. "He might be right about that. Boss knows cattle and horses, but he is terrible at fixing fences." "That is an exaggeration," Zachary protested, but he was grinning. "I am only moderately bad at fences." The easy camaraderie between the three men was apparent, and it helped ease some of Ophelia's tension. She turned back to the stove, aware that they were likely studying her, noticing the scars that her high collar could not quite hide. "Something smells good," Samuel said. "Boss, you have been holding out on us. You did not mention your intended could cook." "There were more important things to mention," Zachary said, and Ophelia appreciated that he did not make an issue of her appearance or rush to explain anything. "Will you join us for breakfast?" Ophelia asked, surprising herself with the invitation. The brothers looked at Zachary, who nodded. "If you made enough, I am sure they would appreciate a hot meal." "I made plenty," Ophelia confirmed. They sat down together, the four of them crowded around the table, and Ophelia served biscuits with gravy and bacon. The men ate with the appreciation of people who spent their days doing hard physical labor, and the conversation flowed around ranch business. Cattle that needed to be moved to better grazing, a fence section that needed repair, a horse that was coming up lame. Ophelia mostly listened, learning about the rhythms and concerns of ranch life. She noticed that none of them stared at her scars, though she caught occasional glances. Samuel and Joseph treated her with casual respect, asking her opinion about whether she preferred the garden expanded or whether she thought the chicken coop was adequate. "I have not had a chance to really examine the garden yet," she admitted, "but I hope to work on it today if that is acceptable." "Whatever you want to do is fine," Zachary assured her. "This is your home now. Well, it will be officially after Sunday, but you understand what I mean." After breakfast, the men headed back out to their work, and Ophelia cleaned up before venturing outside to examine the property in daylight. The morning was already growing warm, though nothing like the heat she had been warned the summer would bring. The garden was in sad shape, overgrown with weeds and dried out from lack of consistent watering. But the soil was decent, and the location good, with some afternoon shade from the house. She could work with this. She found tools in one of the sheds and spent the morning pulling weeds, clearing dead plants, beginning the work of restoration. Her hands, soft from months of idleness in Philadelphia, quickly developed blisters, but the physical labor felt good, purposeful. She was so absorbed in her work that she did not notice Zachary approaching until he spoke. "You should take a break. The sun gets intense even this early in the season." Ophelia sat back on her heels, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. "I wanted to get this section cleared." "It will still be here tomorrow," he said, offering his hand to help her up. "Come inside and have some water. You are not used to this climate yet." She accepted his hand, noting again the strength in his grip, the calluses that matched the ones she was developing. Inside, the house felt blessedly cool after the building heat outside. "I need to ride out to check on the north pasture," Zachary said as she drank deeply from a cup of water. "I will be back before dinner. Will you be all right here alone?" "Of course," Ophelia said. "I am not helpless." "I never thought you were," he said. "I just wanted to make sure you were comfortable." After he left, Ophelia rested for a while, then set about exploring the house more thoroughly, taking stock of supplies, making mental notes of what was needed. She found Zachary's bedroom door open and paused at the threshold, not wanting to intrude but curious. The room was spartanly furnished. A large bed, a dresser, a trunk at the foot of the bed, a few books stacked on a small table. Everything was neat, orderly, the bed made with military precision. It gave her an insight into his character, this careful order maintained even when no one was watching. She did not enter but moved on, respecting his privacy as she hoped he would respect hers. Instead, she returned to the main room and the bookshelf she had noticed earlier. The selection was eclectic. Some classics like Shakespeare and Dickens, practical books on cattle ranching and animal husbandry, a few dime novels, and surprisingly, a book of poetry. She pulled out the poetry and settled into one of the chairs by the cold fireplace, letting herself get lost in words for the first time in days. When Zachary returned in the late afternoon, he found her still there, the book open on her lap. "Finding anything interesting?" he asked. She held up the book. "I did not expect to find Wordsworth on a cattle ranch." "My mother's book," he explained. "She loved poetry, used to read to us in the evenings when I was a child. I brought it with me when I left Kansas. Reminds me of her." "It is a gift, having something like that," Ophelia said softly. "What do you have? From before?" he asked, then seemed to realize the question might be painful. "I am sorry, you do not have to answer that." "No, it is all right," she said. "I have a locket with a picture of my family. And a book that belonged to my mother, a collection of American poets. I brought it in my trunk." "The important things travel light," Zachary observed. "Yes," she agreed. "They do." That evening they prepared dinner together, working in companionable near silence. Ophelia found herself relaxing slightly into the rhythm of sharing space with another person. Zachary moved carefully around the kitchen, aware of her presence, offering to reach things on high shelves, asking what she needed. After dinner, as they sat with coffee, Zachary said, "Tomorrow, I thought we might ride into Lordsburg. You could meet some people, see the town in daylight, pick up any supplies you need. And I should talk to Reverend Hartwell about Sunday." All right, Ophelia agreed, though her stomach tightened at the thought of meeting more people. You are nervous, he observed. Is it that obvious? You get very still when you are anxious, he said. Like you are trying to take up as little space as possible. She was surprised he had noticed. People stare. They try not to, but they do. And then they either ask intrusive questions or they avoid looking at me altogether. Both are uncomfortable. People here might stare too, Zachary said honestly. It is a small community and you are new. They would probably stare even without the scars just because you are a stranger. But I will be with you, and if anyone is rude, they will answer to me. I do not need you to fight my battles, Ophelia said quickly. I know you do not need me to. But as my wife, you will have my support whether you need it or not. That is part of what marriage means to me. The casual way he referred to her as his wife, even though the ceremony had not yet happened, made something warm unfold in Ophelia's chest. Thank you, she said quietly. The next morning they set out early for Lordsburg, the wagon ride giving them another opportunity to talk. Zachary told her about the town's history, how it had grown up around the railroad, how it served as a supply point for ranchers and miners scattered across the territory. It is not much compared to Philadelphia, he warned. Maybe 300 people on a busy day, but it has what we need. A general store, a blacksmith, a doctor, a school, a few other businesses. Lordsburg looked even smaller in daylight than it had when she arrived. The main street was unpaved, lined with wooden buildings weathered by sun and wind. A few people moved about their business, and several turned to watch as Zachary's wagon rolled past. He pulled up in front of the general store. Mr. and Mrs. Callahan run this place. They are good people. Inside, the store was dim and crowded with merchandise, everything from food staples to mining equipment. A woman behind the counter looked up as they entered, her expression curious. Zachary Morrison, she said warmly. About time you showed your face in town. And this must be the young lady we heard about. Mrs. Callahan, may I introduce Miss Ophelia Lancaster, my intended. Ophelia, this is Ruth Callahan. Ruth came around the counter, a round woman in her 50s with sharp, intelligent eyes. Ophelia braced herself for the reaction, but Ruth simply smiled and took her hand. Welcome to Lordsburg, dear. We are glad to have another woman in the area. Lord knows we need more civilizing influence around here. Thank you, Ophelia managed, caught off guard by the straightforward welcome. Now, what can I help you folks with today? Ruth asked. All business. For the next hour, Ophelia browsed the store's offerings while Zachary discussed supplies with Ruth's husband, who had emerged from the back room. She selected practical items. Fabric for curtains and possibly a new dress, thread, needles, some personal items she needed, a few extra kitchen supplies. Ruth helped her, offering advice on what items held up best in the climate, what was worth the extra cost. If you need help with sewing or anything like that, you just let me know, Ruth said. Or better yet, come to our ladies' gathering. We meet every Thursday afternoon at the church. Just a chance for the women to get together, work on projects, talk without the men around. I will think about it, Ophelia said, not wanting to commit but touched by the invitation. As they loaded the supplies into the wagon, Zachary said, That went well, I think. She did not ask about my scars, Ophelia said, still surprised. Ruth Callahan is a practical woman. She cares more about character than appearance. Always has. Their next stop was the church, a small white building at the end of the main street. Reverend Hartwell was there, an older man with a weathered face and gentle manner. He agreed immediately to perform the ceremony on Sunday afternoon. I am happy to do it, he said, shaking both their hands. We need more families settling in this territory. You have witnesses arranged. I plan to ask the Torres brothers and the Haskell family, Zachary said. Fine choices. What about music? Zachary looked at Ophelia. Did you want music? She had not thought about it. The idea of a wedding with all the traditional trimmings had seemed impossible for so long. I do not need anything elaborate. Martha Haskell plays piano, Reverend Hartwell suggested. She might be willing. I do not want to impose, Ophelia said. It would not be an imposition, Zachary assured her. Martha enjoys any excuse to play. I will ask when I invite them to the ceremony. As they prepared to leave the church, Reverend Hartwell said to Ophelia, Miss Lancaster, I hope you will be happy here. New Mexico territory can be harsh, but it also offers opportunities for new beginnings. I sense you might appreciate that. I do, Reverend. Thank you. On the ride back to the ranch, Ophelia was quiet, processing the morning. Zachary let her have her silence until they were nearly home, then said, You did well today. I barely did anything, she protested. You met new people in a strange place. You held your head up. That takes courage. I thought I would feel more afraid, Ophelia admitted. But Ruth was kind, and the Reverend was welcoming, and no one made me feel like a curiosity. I told you the people here are decent. You did, she agreed. I suppose I had trouble believing it. The next few days fell into a rhythm. Ophelia worked on the garden and the house while Zachary and the Torres brothers managed the ranch work. In the evenings, she and Zachary shared meals and conversation, gradually learning each other's habits and preferences. She discovered that Zachary was an early riser, often up before dawn to check on the animals. He preferred his coffee strong and his meals simple. He read before bed most nights, usually ranch journals or agricultural reports, sometimes returning to his mother's poetry book. He had a dry sense of humor that emerged when he was comfortable, and he was unfailingly polite even when exhausted from a long day's work. For his part, Zachary learned that Ophelia was methodical in her approach to tasks, making lists and plans. She sang softly to herself when she thought no one was listening, old songs her mother had taught her. She had a practical streak, but also a romantic side that emerged when she thought about the garden or the landscape. She was tougher than she looked, pushing through physical discomfort without complaint. On Saturday, the day before the wedding, Martha Haskell arrived with her 3 daughters in tow, a wagon loaded with what appeared to be half their household goods. I hope you do not mind, Martha said as she climbed down from the wagon, a tall woman with prematurely gray hair and a weathered but kind face. Zachary mentioned you were new to the territory, and I thought you might appreciate some help getting ready for tomorrow. Her daughters, ranging in age from perhaps 10 to 16, immediately began unloading the wagon under their mother's direction. There were pies, a dress that Martha thought might fit Ophelia, wildflowers for bouquets, and a seemingly endless array of other items. This is too much, Ophelia protested, overwhelmed by the generosity. Nonsense, Martha said briskly. A woman only gets married once. Well, mostly once. Either way, it should be marked properly. She stepped closer and lowered her voice. Besides, I remember what it was like when I first arrived out here from Virginia. I was so lonely and scared, and if Mrs. Patterson had not taken me under her wing, I might have lost my mind. So let me do for you what was done for me. Ophelia felt tears pricking her eyes. Thank you. Now then, Martha said, back to brisk efficiency, let us see about making sure you have everything you need for tomorrow. The afternoon passed in a flurry of activity. Martha helped Ophelia try on the dress, a simple but elegant blue calico that needed only minor alterations. The oldest daughter, whose name was Elizabeth, turned out to be skilled with a needle and made quick work of the adjustments. The middle daughter, Catherine, helped arrange the wildflowers into simple but beautiful bouquets. The youngest, Anne, mostly watched with big eyes, occasionally asking questions that her mother gently redirected. "Mama," Anne said at one point, "why does Miss Ophelia's neck look different?" "Anne," Martha said sharply, but Ophelia held up a hand. "It is all right," she said, kneeling down to be at eye level with the child. "I was in a fire when I was younger. These marks are scars from that fire. They are part of me now. Do they hurt?" Anne asked with a child's directness. "Sometimes a little, but mostly they are just there. They remind me that I survived something very frightening." "I think they make you look brave," Anne said seriously, "like a warrior." Ophelia felt her throat tighten. "Thank you, Anne. That is very kind." After the Haskells finally left, promising to return in the morning to help Ophelia prepare, she found Zachary in the barn and told him about Anne's comment. "Children often see more clearly than adults," Zachary said. "They have not learned to judge based on appearance yet." "I hope I can be worthy of that little girl's idea of bravery," Ophelia said. Zachary set down the leather strap he had been mending and looked at her directly. "Ophelia, you already are. You left everything familiar, traveled across the country to start a new life with a stranger. That is incredibly brave. Or incredibly desperate," she said with a rueful smile. "Maybe both," he allowed. "But desperation that drives us to take chances, to seek something better, that is just another form of courage." That evening, their last before becoming husband and wife, felt different. There was a weight to it, an awareness that tomorrow everything would change. They were quiet over dinner, both lost in their own thoughts. "Are you having second thoughts?" Zachary finally asked. Ophelia considered the question seriously. "No," she said. "Are you?" "No," he said firmly. "I know this arrangement is unusual. I know we barely know each other. But I believe we can build something good here if we are both willing to try." "I am willing," Ophelia said. "Then that is enough for now," Zachary replied. "The rest we will figure out as we go." Sunday morning dawned clear and warm. Martha Haskell arrived early with her daughters, shooing Zachary out of the house so they could help Ophelia prepare. She bathed carefully, washed her hair, then let Elizabeth help arrange it in a style that was both elegant and practical. The blue dress fit well after the alterations, and Martha had brought a shawl that could be draped over Ophelia's shoulders for the ceremony. "Something borrowed," Martha explained. "And I have a pin that belonged to my mother for something old. Elizabeth, do you have that handkerchief?" "Something new," Elizabeth said, presenting a delicate handkerchief she had embroidered with Ophelia's new initials, O.M. "And something blue is your dress," Catherine added. "So you have everything for luck." "I do not know how to thank you all," Ophelia said, feeling emotions threatening to overwhelm her composure. "You thank us by being happy," Martha said simply. "Now, let us get to the church. We do not want to keep the groom waiting." The church was small, but it felt full with the Torah's brothers, the Haskell family, Reverend Hartwell, Ruth and Mr. Callahan, and a few other community members Ophelia had not yet met. As she walked down the short aisle on Frank Haskell's arm, having no father to perform the duty, she saw Zachary standing at the front, and something in her chest expanded. He had dressed in what were clearly his best clothes: dark trousers, a white shirt, a vest, his hair neatly combed. But what struck her was his expression when he looked at her walking toward him. There was no hesitation, no doubt, just steady certainty. The ceremony was simple and traditional. They spoke their vows clearly, their voices steady. When Reverend Hartwell pronounced them husband and wife and Zachary leaned in to kiss her, Ophelia felt a moment of panic, wondering if he would be repulsed by the scarred side of her face. But his kiss was gentle, respectful and brief, appropriate for the public setting. "I present to you Mr. and Mrs. Zachary Morrison," Reverend Hartwell announced, and the small congregation applauded. The celebration afterward at the hotel dining room was modest but warm. Someone had brought a fiddle, and there was music and simple food. Ophelia found herself passed from one introduction to another, names and faces blurring together. But everyone was kind, welcoming her to the community. Samuel Torres proposed a toast. To Zachary and Ophelia, may your marriage be strong, your cattle fat, and your water sweet. Everyone laughed and raised their glasses. Later, as the sun began to set and the party began to wind down, Zachary leaned close and murmured, "Ready to go home, home." The word resonated strangely, but Ophelia nodded. Yes. They said their goodbyes, accepting well wishes and offers of help from their neighbors, then climbed into the wagon for the ride back to the ranch. The setting sun painted the landscape in shades of gold and orange, the desert taking on an unexpected beauty in the fading light. "That went well," Zachary said. "Everyone seemed to enjoy themselves." "Your friends are kind," Ophelia said. "I did not expect such a warm welcome." "They are your friends now, too," he pointed out. "That is one benefit of marriage. You inherit each other's people." When they arrived back at the ranch, Zachary helped her down from the wagon, and they stood for a moment in the twilight, not quite knowing what to do next. The awkwardness of the situation was suddenly apparent. They were married now, husband and wife, but they were still strangers in many ways. "Ophelia," Zachary said carefully, "I want you to know that I do not have expectations for tonight. I know this is all sudden, and I do not want you to feel pressured. We can take our time, let things develop naturally." Relief and something else, perhaps disappointment, mingled in Ophelia's chest. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that you can keep your room for now if you want. We are married legally, and that is what matters for propriety. The rest, the intimacy, that can wait until you are comfortable." Ophelia studied his face in the growing darkness. "Is that what you want?" "I want you to feel safe," he said. "I want this marriage to work. Pushing too fast seems like a good way to ruin it." She considered his words, this man who had shown her more consideration and respect in a few days than many had shown in years. "Can I think about it?" "Of course. Take all the time you need." Inside, the house felt different somehow, charged with new significance. Ophelia went to her room, removed the borrowed shawl and the fancy dress, changed into her nightgown. She sat on the edge of the bed, thinking. She was married now. This was her life, this ranch, this man. She could hide behind fear and scars and old wounds, or she could step forward into this new beginning with the courage everyone seemed to think she possessed. Before she could lose her nerve, she walked to Zachary's door and knocked softly. "Come in," he called. He was sitting on the edge of his own bed, also changed for the night, holding his mother's poetry book but not reading it. He looked up in surprise when she entered. "I have been thinking," Ophelia said, "about what you said earlier, about taking our time." "Yes." He prompted carefully. "I appreciate your consideration, but I wonder if waiting makes it more frightening, not less. We are married now. This is our life together. Maybe we should just begin as we mean to go on." Zachary set aside the book and stood. "Are you sure?" "I do not want you to feel obligated." "I am sure," Ophelia said, and she was. "I am tired of being afraid, and I think you might be the first person in a very long time who does not see me as something damaged that needs careful handling." He crossed the room slowly, giving her every opportunity to change her mind. When he reached her, he gently cupped her face, his rough hand surprisingly tender. His fingers traced the edge of her scars without hesitation or revulsion. "I told you before," he said softly. "I see strength when I look at you. That has not changed. That will not change." When he kissed her this time, it was different from the brief ceremony kiss. This was deeper, more certain, a promise of the life they were building together. Ophelia felt something inside her, some tightly wound coil of fear and self-protection, begin to unwind. What followed was tender and awkward and real, two people learning each other, finding their way together. Zachary was patient, careful, making sure she felt comfortable. Ophelia discovered that her scars, which she had feared would repulse him, did not seem to register as anything but part of her skin, part of her story. Afterward, lying together in the darkness, Zachary's arm around her, Ophelia felt something she had not felt in 3 years, hopeful. "Are you all right?" Zachary murmured. "Yes," she said, and meant it. "I am all right." "Good," he said simply, and pulled her closer. She fell asleep to the sound of his breathing, feeling safer than she had since before the fire. The next weeks fell into a rhythm that began to feel like a real life, not just an arrangement. Ophelia threw herself into making the house a home, sewing curtains, reorganizing the kitchen, coaxing the garden back to life. Zachary worked the ranch, coming in for meals with stories about ornery cattle or broken fences or the coyote he had seen watching the herd. They learned to read each other's moods, to work together on chores, to share the daily rhythms of ranch life. In the evenings, they would sit together, sometimes reading, sometimes just talking. Zachary told her about his dreams for expanding the herd, maybe buying adjacent land if it came available. Ophelia shared her ideas for the garden, for possibly raising chickens not just for eggs but to sell in town. The physical intimacy between them grew more comfortable, more natural. Ophelia found that Zachary was true to his word in all things. He never made her feel self-conscious about her scars. His hands would trace them sometimes in the darkness, but in the same way he would touch any part of her, with affection and acceptance. A month after the wedding, Martha Haskell stopped by with her daughters. "I wanted to invite you formally to Our Lady's Thursday gathering," she said. "I know you have been settling in, but I think you are ready to meet more of the community now." Ophelia hesitated, old insecurities rising, but then nodded. "I would like that." The Thursday gathering was held in the church's small community room. About a dozen women were there, ranging from young mothers to older widows. They were working on a quilt together, and they made space for Ophelia, showed her where to sew, included her in the conversation. There was a moment when one of the older women, Mrs. Patterson, looked at Ophelia's scars directly and said, "Those must have hurt something terrible when you got them." The conversation stopped, everyone looking to see how Ophelia would respond. She took a breath and said, "They did." "Fire is not a gentle teacher." "But you survived," Mrs. Patterson said. "That is what matters. I have a nephew who was burned in a barn fire, took months to heal, makes you tough going through something like that." And just like that, the moment passed. The conversation moved on to other topics. Children's sicknesses, recipes, the territorial governor's latest pronouncements, the drought conditions and hopes for the summer monsoons. Ophelia found herself relaxing, even laughing at some of the stories. These women lived hard lives in a harsh place, and they did not waste energy on superficial judgments. What mattered was whether you could be counted on, whether you pulled your weight, whether you were kind to your neighbors. When she returned home that afternoon, Zachary was fixing a gate near the barn. "How was it?" he asked. "Good," Ophelia said, surprised to realize she meant it. "Really good. They are nice women." "Told you," Zachary said with a satisfied smile. "People here care more about character." "You were right," she admitted. "I should have trusted you." "You barely knew me when you arrived," he pointed out reasonably. "Trust takes time, but I am glad you are beginning to feel comfortable here." Summer arrived in full force, the heat intense, the landscape baked brown. The monsoon rains Zachary had mentioned began in July. dramatic afternoon thunderstorms that turned the sky dark and sent sheets of rain across the parched earth. Ophelia loved watching the storms roll in, the way the whole world seemed to come alive with the water. She was working in the garden one afternoon when she heard a rider approaching fast. Looking up, she saw Joseph Torres racing toward the house, his face anxious. "Mrs. Morrison," he called, "we need help. Samuel was thrown from his horse. His leg is hurt bad." Ophelia did not hesitate. "Where?" "North pasture. Boss is with him, but we need to get him back to the house. Boss sent me to fetch you, thought you might know something about doctoring." "Help me hitch the wagon," Ophelia said, already moving toward the barn. Her hands were shaking, but she forced herself to stay calm. She had helped tend her mother's patients when her mother had volunteered with the charitable society in Philadelphia. She knew some basics of nursing. They raced across the rough terrain, the wagon bouncing dangerously, until they reached the spot where Zachary knelt beside Samuel. The injured man's face was gray with pain, his right leg bent at an unnatural angle. "It is broken," Zachary said grimly. "Badly. We need to get him to Doc Morrison in town." "That is 2 hours away," Ophelia said, kneeling beside Samuel. She looked at the break, her stomach churning but her mind clear. "If we move him without stabilizing it first, we could make it worse. We need to splint it here." "Do you know how?" Zachary asked. "I have seen it done. I can try." Using fence posts, Joseph retrieved and strips torn from her petticoat. Ophelia carefully stabilized Samuel's leg. The injured man groaned but stayed conscious, biting down on a piece of leather to keep from screaming. It was delicate work, and Ophelia's hands were slick with sweat by the time she finished, but the leg was immobilized. "Good work," Zachary said quietly. "Now let us get him to town." The trip to Lordsburg was agonizing, trying to move quickly but not jostle Samuel too badly. By the time they reached Doc Morrison's office, Ophelia's nerves were frayed, but Samuel's leg had stayed in position. Doc Morrison, a gruff man in his 60s, examined the splint and grunted approval. "Good work on the stabilization. Might have saved him complications. Now let us see about setting this properly." The sun was setting by the time they were able to head back to the ranch. Samuel settled uncomfortably in the back of the wagon with his newly set and properly splinted leg. Doc Morrison had given him laudanum for the pain, and he was drowsy, drifting in and out of sleep. "He is going to need care for the next few weeks," Zachary said quietly to Ophelia as they drove. "He cannot stay alone in his cabin. I was thinking we could set him up in the house, let him recover in the spare room." "Of course," Ophelia agreed immediately. "We have space and he will need help with basic tasks." Joseph, riding alongside the wagon, said, "I can handle both our work for a while, boss. Samuel just needs to heal." "We will all manage together," Zachary said firmly. Over the next weeks, Ophelia found herself in the role of nurse. She helped Samuel with meals, changed his bandages, made sure he was taking his medicine, kept him company during the long, boring hours of recovery. The young man was embarrassed by his helplessness at first, but Ophelia's matter-of-fact care eventually put him at ease. "You are a natural at this," Samuel said one afternoon as Ophelia was helping him sit up to eat. "Have you done nursing before?" "A little, back in Philadelphia. My mother used to volunteer helping the poor and I would go with her sometimes, but I never had formal training." "Could have fooled me," Samuel said. "You have the temperament for it, patient but firm." "I will take that as a compliment," Ophelia said with a smile. "It is one," Samuel assured her. "Boss is lucky to have you." The comment warmed her more than she expected. She was building a life here, becoming part of the community, being useful and valued. It was everything she had hoped for when she had made the terrifying decision to travel west. One evening after Samuel had fallen asleep, She was sitting outside with Zachary, watching the stars, and he said, "You have been amazing through all this. I know caring for Samuel has been extra work on top of everything else." "He is our friend," Ophelia said simply. "Of course I would help." "Not everyone would," Zachary pointed out. "Some people would resent the intrusion, but you just stepped up and did what needed doing. That is one of the things I admire about you." "One of the things," Ophelia teased gently. He smiled. "I have a list, but it is quite long. Might take all night to recite." "We have all night," she said softly. He took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "Then maybe I will start with the fact that you are brave without even realizing it. You face things head on, whether it is a garden full of weeds or a broken leg that needs splinting. You do not shy away from hard things." "I do not feel brave," Ophelia admitted. "I feel like I am making it up as I go along." "That is what bravery is," Zachary said. "Doing what needs doing even when you are scared or uncertain." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, then Zachary said, "I want you to know, this has become a real marriage for me. Somewhere between the wedding and now, you stopped being a solution to loneliness and became my wife in every sense. I care about you, Ophelia, more than I expected to when I first placed that advertisement." Ophelia felt her heart swell. "I care about you too. I think I started falling for you when you said you saw strength, not scars. No one had ever said anything like that to me before." "Then everyone else was blind," Zachary said firmly. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "You are remarkable, Ophelia Morrison. I am grateful every day that you took a chance on a stranger in New Mexico." Samuel recovered slowly but steadily. By late August, he was able to move around with crutches, and by September, he was ready to move back to his own cabin, though he still could not do heavy ranch work. Joseph had proven himself more than capable of handling double duties, and Zachary had hired a temporary hand to help through the fall roundup. The day Samuel left, he hugged Ophelia carefully. "Thank you," he said simply, "for everything." "You are family," Ophelia said. "That is what family does." After he left, Zachary said, "You know, we never talked about children. I mentioned in my letters that I wanted a family, but we have never discussed it properly since you arrived." Ophelia felt her stomach flip. "Are you asking if I want children?" "I am asking if you feel ready to think about it," he said. "I do not want to rush you. We have only been married a few months, but I also do not want you to think I have forgotten my hope for a family." "I want children," Ophelia said. "I worried for a long time that it would never happen for me, that no one would want me as a wife, let alone as the mother of their children. Now that I have you, have this life, yes, I want to fill this house with children." Zachary smiled, one of his rare full smiles that transformed his weathered face. "Then we are in agreement." "We are," she confirmed. As autumn painted the landscape in muted golds and browns, Ophelia began to suspect she might be pregnant. She kept her suspicions to herself at first, not wanting to raise hopes prematurely. But when she missed her second monthly cycle and began experiencing morning queasiness, she knew. She told Zachary on a cool October evening as they sat by the fire, "I think I am going to have a baby." His reaction was immediate and joyful. He pulled her into a tight embrace, laughing. "Are you sure?" "As sure as I can be without seeing a doctor. But yes, I think so." "We should go to town tomorrow," Zachary said. "Have Doc Morrison confirm it." Doc Morrison did confirm it the next day, estimating she was about 2 months along, which would put the birth in late April or early May. "You are healthy and strong," he told Ophelia. "No reason to expect any problems. But you take it easy, no heavy lifting, and come see me every few weeks so we can make sure everything is progressing well." The news spread through the community quickly, as news did in small places. Women began stopping by with advice, hand-me-down baby clothes, offers of help. Martha Haskell began organizing what she called a baby shower, though Ophelia had never heard the term before. "It is something my mother did back in Virginia," Martha explained. "The women gather and bring gifts for the mother and baby. Practical things mostly, diapers and blankets and the like." Winter settled over the ranch, cold nights and occasional snow. Ophelia's pregnancy progressed normally, her body changing to accommodate the new life growing inside her. Zachary was attentive but not smothering, helping with heavy tasks but trusting her to know her own limits. She continued to attend the Thursday ladies' gatherings when weather permitted, working on sewing baby clothes, accepting advice, feeling more connected to the community. These women, who had seemed like strangers just months ago, were becoming friends. One snowy afternoon in January, as she sat by the fire doing needlework, Zachary came in from checking the animals and said, "I was thinking about what to name the baby, if you have not already decided." "I have thought about it," Ophelia admitted. "If it is a girl, I would like to name her Sarah after my mother, but I have not settled on a boy's name." "What about Joseph?" Zachary suggested. "For my father." "Joseph Morrison," Ophelia said, testing the name. "I like it, and if it is a boy, we could call him Joe for short." "Then we have a plan," Zachary said with satisfaction. As winter gave way to early spring, Ophelia felt the baby's movements growing stronger. Zachary loved putting his hand on her swollen belly to feel the kicks. "Strong one," he would say with pride. "Going to be a fighter." "Just like his or her parents," Ophelia would respond. The baby decided to arrive on a warm afternoon in late April, a few days before Ophelia and Zachary's first anniversary. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next morning. Martha Haskell was there, having come to help, and Doc Morrison arrived from town when Joseph Torres rode to fetch him. Zachary paced in the main room, not allowed in the bedroom, wearing a path in the floorboards. Every cry of pain from Ophelia made him flinch. Finally, in the early morning hours, a new sound emerged, the thin wail of a newborn baby. Martha emerged, tired but smiling. "You have a son," she said. "A healthy boy, and your wife is fine, just exhausted." Zachary rushed into the room. Ophelia lay propped up in bed, sweaty and pale but with a look of wonder on her face as she held a tiny bundle wrapped in a blanket. She looked up as he entered, tears streaming down her face. "Meet your son," she whispered. Zachary approached carefully, looking down at the impossibly small face, the tiny fists waving. "He is perfect," he said hoarsely. "Joseph," Ophelia said. "Our Joe." Zachary leaned down carefully and kissed her forehead. "You are amazing, absolutely amazing." "Says the man who did not have to push a baby out," she said. But she was smiling. The first weeks with a newborn were exhausting and overwhelming and wonderful. Little Joe had healthy lungs and made his needs known loudly. Ophelia was sore and tired, but every time she looked at her son, she felt overwhelming love. Zachary proved to be a devoted father, walking the floors at night when Joe was fussy, changing diapers without complaint, looking at his son with undisguised awe. "I cannot believe he is ours," he would say. "That we made him." "Biology is quite remarkable that way," Ophelia would tease. The community rallied around them, women bringing meals, offering to hold the baby so Ophelia could rest, giving advice on everything from colic to diaper rash. Samuel and Joseph Torres brought a hand-carved cradle they had made together, intricate work that must have taken weeks. "For the young boss," Samuel said with a grin when they presented it. Ophelia was deeply touched by the gift, by the care that had gone into it. "Thank you both. This is beautiful." As spring turned to summer, Life settled into a new rhythm built around Joe's needs. Ophelia was amazed by how much she loved being a mother, despite the exhaustion and constant demands. Watching Zachary with their son, seeing the gentleness in his rough hands as he held the baby, made her fall in love with her husband all over again. One warm evening in late summer, Joe was finally sleeping, and Ophelia and Zachary sat outside watching the sunset as they had done so many times before. Zachary reached over and took her hand. "You ever think about how different your life would be if you had not answered that advertisement?" he asked. Ophelia considered. "Sometimes. I could still be in Philadelphia living with my aunt, working in some back room as a seamstress, trying to be invisible. I would not have this." She gestured at the landscape, the house, the whole life they had built. "I would not have you or Joe. It is hard to even imagine now." "I think about it too," Zachary admitted. "About how empty this place felt before you came. I was just going through the motions, building something but not sure why. Now I know. I was building a home for you, for us, for our family. I just did not know it yet." "We took a chance on each other," Ophelia said. "Two desperate people hoping for something better." "And we got it," Zachary said. "We got everything we hoped for and more." Ophelia thought about the journey that had brought her here, from the fire in Philadelphia to a ranch in New Mexico territory. She thought about the scars she carried, both visible and invisible, and how Zachary had seen past them to the person underneath. She thought about the community that had welcomed her, the friends she had made, the life she was building. "You know what I realized," she said softly. "The fire took so much from me. My family, my home, my sense of safety. It marked me in ways I will carry forever, but it also led me here. If I had not been scarred, if I had not been desperate enough to respond to a mail-order bride advertisement, I would never have found you. I do not want you to have to justify your scars or find meaning in trauma," Zachary said carefully. "I am not," Ophelia assured him. "The fire was terrible, and I would give anything to have my family back. But given that I cannot change what happened, I can at least acknowledge that it led me to something good. To you, to this life, to Joe." Zachary pulled her closer, and they sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky. From inside the house, Joe made a small sound but settled back to sleep without waking fully. "I love you," Zachary said quietly. "I do not think I have said it properly before. But I love you, Ophelia, not despite your scars or because of them. Just you, all of you, exactly as you are." Ophelia felt tears on her cheeks. "I love you too. You saw strength when everyone else saw damage. You gave me a chance when I thought I was out of chances. You made me believe I could have a future." "We made a future together," Zachary corrected gently. "That is what marriage is, building something neither of us could build alone." The years that followed were full of the ordinary joys and challenges of ranch life. They added to their herd, bought additional land when the opportunity arose, weathered droughts and hard winters and market downturns. Samuel and Joseph remained loyal employees and close friends. The community continued to embrace them, and Ophelia became a respected member of the ladies' group, known for her practical advice and steady temperament. Joe grew into a bright, energetic toddler, and when he was 2 years old, Ophelia found herself pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy felt easier, her body knowing what to expect. In the spring of 1886, they welcomed a daughter they named Sarah, after Ophelia's mother. With 2 young children, the house felt full of life and noise and love. Joe was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything. Zachary would often come in from a day's work to find his wife surrounded by children, looking exhausted but content. "You look happy," he said one evening, watching her nurse Sarah while Joe played with wooden blocks at her feet. I am, Ophelia said simply. I did not think this life was possible for me. A husband, children, a home, a community that accepts me. I thought the fire had taken all of that away. But it was just waiting here in New Mexico, waiting for me to be brave enough to claim it. Our children will grow up seeing your scars as just part of you, Zachary observed. Joe has never known you any other way. To him, that is just what Mama looks like. I hope I can teach them to see past appearances to what matters, Ophelia said. To judge people by character, not surface. That is what this community taught me. As the children grew, Ophelia made sure they learned the stories of their grandparents, kept alive the memories of people they would never meet. She told them about her parents and brother who died in the fire, about Zachary's family lost to cholera. She wanted them to understand the journeys that had brought their parents together. She also made sure they learned about the land they lived on, the territory's complex history, the various peoples who had called this place home. She taught them to respect their Mexican-American neighbors like the Torres brothers, to understand that families came in all forms. One afternoon when Joe was about 6 and Sarah was 4, Joe asked about his mother's scars. "Mama, how did you get hurt?" Ophelia had known the question would come eventually. She knelt down to be at eye level with her children and told them an age-appropriate version of the story. "There was a fire when I was younger. It hurt me, but I survived. These marks remind me that I am strong." "Papa says you are the strongest person he knows," Sarah offered seriously. "Does he now?" Ophelia said with a smile. "He does," Zachary confirmed, coming in from outside with an armload of firewood. "I tell everyone that my wife is the bravest, strongest person in the territory." "Papa might be biased," Ophelia said to the children. "What's biased?" Joe asked. "It means he loves me so much he might not be objective," Ophelia explained. "I am perfectly objective," Zachary protested, setting down the wood and sweeping Sarah up into his arms. "Your mother is objectively the best wife and mother in New Mexico territory, possibly all the Western territories combined." The children giggled, and Ophelia shook her head in mock exasperation. "You are impossible. Impossible to live without," Zachary said with a wink. Over the years, the ranch prospered. They built an addition onto the house, adding more bedrooms and a larger kitchen. The cattle herd grew, and they developed a reputation for quality livestock. Zachary became respected in the Regional Ranchers Association. His opinion sought on matters of range management and breeding. Ophelia became known for her garden, which had grown from the weedy plot she had first tackled to an impressive operation that supplied not only their family, but also produced extra vegetables and herbs to sell in town. She also began helping other women in the community with medical matters, her nursing skills honed through practical experience becoming valuable in a place where doctors were scarce. When New Mexico achieved statehood in 1912, they celebrated with a party at the ranch, inviting everyone they knew. Joe, now a young man of 22, was talking about buying his own land and starting his own ranch. Sarah, 20, was being courted by a young lawyer who had recently moved to Lordsburg. "We are getting old," Zachary said to Ophelia as they watched their children and friends celebrate. "We are getting older," Ophelia corrected. "That is different." He put his arm around her waist, pulling her close. "Do you ever regret it, answering that advertisement coming out here?" Ophelia looked at her husband, his hair now liberally streaked with gray, his face deeply lined from decades of sun and weather. She looked at their children, healthy and happy and confident. She looked at their home, solid and welcoming, filled with friends and neighbors. She thought about the community they had helped build, the lives they had touched, the future they had created. "Not for a single moment," she said firmly. This life, this family, all of this happened because I was brave enough to take a chance. Because you were kind enough to see strength instead of scars. Do I regret that? Never. Good, Zachary said, leaning down to kiss her forehead, because I cannot imagine my life without you in it. As the years continued to pass, they watched with pride as Joe established his own successful ranch and married a kind, practical woman named Clara. Sarah married her lawyer, David, and they settled in Lordsburg, where David opened a practice, and Sarah became known for her charitable work. Grandchildren arrived, first one, then more, filling the house with noise and life during visits. Ophelia loved being a grandmother, loved passing on skills and stories to a new generation. The scars that had once made her believe she would never have a family were now just part of the beloved face her grandchildren knew. Samuel and Joseph Torres eventually married as well, bringing wives to the ranch and starting their own families. The Broken Bell Ranch became almost a small community unto itself, multiple families working together, children playing together, lives intertwined. Martha Haskell, who had become Ophelia's closest friend over the decades, said one day, "Do you remember when you first arrived? How nervous you were about meeting people." "I remember," Ophelia said. They were sitting in Martha's parlor, working on a quilt for Martha's newest grandchild. "I was terrified everyone would reject me because of my scars. And instead, you became one of the most beloved people in the community," Martha said. "Because people could see what Zachary saw from the start, that you are strong and kind and capable." "I had to learn to see it in myself," Ophelia admitted. "For so long I only saw damage when I looked in the mirror. Zachary taught me to see something else." "He loves you very much," Martha observed. "I know," Ophelia said softly, "and I love him. We built something good together, something that will last beyond us." As they moved into their 60s and then 70s, Zachary and Ophelia gradually turned over more of the ranch operations to Joe and his family, though they still lived in the main house and stayed involved in decision-making. They had earned the right to slow down, to spend more time with each other and their grandchildren. One warm evening in the summer of 1923, 40 years after Ophelia had first stepped off the stagecoach in Lordsburg, they sat in their usual spot on the porch, watching the sunset paint the desert in brilliant colors. "We have had a good life," Zachary said, taking her hand. His grip was not as strong as it once was, arthritis making his joints stiff, but his touch was still warm and familiar. "The best life," Ophelia agreed. Her scars had faded somewhat with time, though they would never disappear completely. But they had long ago ceased to matter to her, just part of her history, part of who she was. "You know what I am most proud of?" Zachary asked. "What?" "That we built something lasting. Not just the ranch, though that is certainly something, but a family, a community. We took our pain and losses and turned them into something good. That is a real accomplishment." Ophelia thought about all the years that had passed, all the challenges they had faced and overcome together. "We were lucky," she said, "to find each other, to have this chance." "It was not luck," Zachary said firmly. "It was courage. Yours for answering that advertisement, mine for being honest about what I saw when I looked at you. Courage on both our parts to build something real from what started as a practical arrangement." "When did we fall in love?" Ophelia mused. "I have sometimes wondered if I can pinpoint the exact moment." Zachary considered. "For me, I think it was the day you splinted Samuel's leg. The way you just stepped up and did what needed doing, scared but not letting fear stop you. I looked at you then and thought, this is a woman I could love for the rest of my life." "For me," Ophelia said slowly, "I think it was earlier. That first day when you said you saw strength, not scars. No one had ever looked at me like that before, like my scars were just part of me but not all of me. That is when I started to hope this could be real. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear. From inside the house, they could hear their great-grandchildren playing, visiting for the summer. Life continued, generation after generation, building on what they had started. "I love you, Ophelia Morrison," Zachary said quietly. "I have loved you for 40 years, and I will love you for whatever time we have left." "And I love you," Ophelia replied. "You gave me back my life. You saw me when I thought I was invisible. You showed me that scars do not define us, that strength can grow from pain, that courage is not the absence of fear but moving forward despite it." They stayed there as the night deepened. Two people who had taken a chance on each other 4 decades earlier and built a life beyond what either had dared to hope for. The desert that had seemed so harsh and unwelcoming when Ophelia first arrived had become home. The stranger from a mail-order advertisement had become her partner in every sense. And the scars that she had believed would mark her as damaged forever had become simply part of her story, a testament to survival, a reminder of strength. When Zachary looked at her, even now after 40 years, she knew he saw exactly what he had claimed to see that first day, not scars but the woman who had survived them. That was enough. That was everything. As they finally stood to go inside, Zachary steadied her with a hand on her elbow, and she leaned into his familiar strength. Together, they walked into their home, filled with family and love, and the life they had built together from courage and hope, and the kind of love that sees past surfaces to the truth beneath. Their story, which had begun with a desperate advertisement and a scarred woman's leap of faith, had become something remarkable, something lasting. A testament to the power of seeing clearly, of choosing courage over fear, of recognizing strength even when it comes marked by scars. And in the end, that was the greatest gift Zachary Morrison had given Ophelia Lancaster all those years ago, not a home or security or even love, though those were precious. The greatest gift was teaching her to see herself as he saw her, strong, capable, worthy and beautiful exactly as she was.